Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you my August wrap-up. I forgot what month it was. So August has been a fun month. I have been doing a lot, not all of which has been book or booktube related, but that's okay. It's been a weird month. So basically what did I do? I batch filmed a ton of stuff kind of at the beginning of August, and then I just sort of forgot to film anything, which is why I haven't had a lot of stuff go up. I got really sick toward the end of August. I had something, I don't know what it was, but I had something that was just completely and totally just sapping my energy to the point where all I could do was like lay in bed and scroll on Twitter and stare at the cats if they were nearby. I couldn't really do much else. I have been doing a lot of knitting, not a ton of reading. Yeah, it's been lots of ups and downs, but hopefully I'm getting back to normal here because I have finally kind of been bitten by the booktube bug once again. It's been about 4 weeks since I've actually filmed anything. I just did my September wrap-up, which is more of just a panic of all of the stuff that I have to read. I think it's like 36 books long. It's just my reading schedule for the end of the year. Yeah, I have been missing doing booktube and stuff like that, but I think I just needed a little bit of a break, and then I got sick, which kind of forced me to take a break, so it's great. It's finally cooled off in the UK. It's officially sweater weather. I'm really excited. I have the window open to get some nice cool air into the flat. However, I live in kind of a noisy area, so if you hear any screaming, dogs barking, that's what that is. I'm just gonna get that out of the way first. So this month I read, what's this? Is this 9 books? Yeah, I read 9 books this month, and with varying degrees of success. I read probably one of my favorite books of the year. I read my best book of the year so far, which is great because it's getting a little bit sweaty trying to figure out what my best book would be, because I haven't really loved anything as much as I loved this one. I did a very rare reread, and I read some graphic novels, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started, and I'll let you know what I read in order of how I read it. I think I'm gonna try to keep these in order. We'll see. So the first 2 books that I read this month were my graphic novels. These are the first 2 volumes of Lumberjanes by Noelle Stevenson and Grace Ellis. Basically, Scottish husband bought these for me, which was very sweet of him. He kind of took a gamble. He wanted to buy me something, but didn't want me to like know what he was gonna get, so he took a gamble and he bought the second one by accident and then panic ordered the first one, which is very cute. So I read these first things first this month, and I really enjoyed them. They're very sweet. So basically we follow a group of best friends who are at a summer camp, like a sleepaway summer camp, and it is not an ordinary summer camp. There are monsters and witches in the woods, and it's very silly. I really enjoyed these. I did not like Nimona. Something about Nimona didn't work for me, which is by the same author, Noelle Stevenson, but for some reason this one clicked with me more. I don't know why. It's got a lot of the same kind of silliness to it. I think maybe it's because it's this group of friends and they kind of work really well together. There's a raccoon named Bubbles. Like, it's just great. I really enjoyed these. So I gave these 4 stars each. The next book that I read is one of my most anticipated books of the year. I loved it, and I'm really happy I did. This is The Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky. He is the author of Children of Time and Children of Ruin. Children of Time being, of course, one of my absolute favorite books of all time that I will never shut up about. It's just so good. I love his science fiction. I'm a little less fond of his fantasy, but I think he's an absolutely fabulous writer. So this is his new book that came out in early August, and I think it's just fantastic. It's a really great place to start, not only with his stuff, but also with science fiction if you are a newbie, but also I think that this is one that veterans of the genre will enjoy as well. So this is quite complicated. We have multiple points of view, multiple characters, and all those storylines end up tying together. One of our storylines is a girl who was kind of a amateur cryptid hunter with her best friend slash lover, and her girlfriend disappears on one of these kind of hunts for this creature called the Birdman, and she's been kind of left behind for 5 years, and she eventually comes back. She discovers that her girlfriend has come back. We follow a character who is a sort of like a IT technician for MI5, and his colleague as well. We follow a ton of different characters and all these storylines come together, but basically this book is all about parallel universes. It's about evolutionary biology, and it's brilliant. I really, really, really loved it. It's, I think, far more accessible than maybe something like Children of Time, because much of it is set in the real world and the present day in London. So there's a lot of familiarity for people who are maybe stepping into the genre a little bit more. It's a very pacey and really fun read. It's got his signature weirdness. There are like rat men, there are spacefaring trilobites, there's all this good stuff in this book, but I thought it was just absolutely fabulous. I really enjoyed it. It's got great characters as well. The one thing that I will say about this, just as a heads up, I do think that some of the sort of treatment of one of the characters is a little bit rough. If you are sensitive to kind of the way that trans characters are treated and dead naming and things like that. So one of the main characters who's fabulous and I absolutely loved is a trans woman, and she's absolutely brilliant. I really loved her character. I thought he did a great job with that, but he has some characters kind of show their ignorance by doing things like dead naming this character, and I think that maybe some of the treatment, it's definitely not like a huge pervasive thing through the book, but it does definitely come up. The treatment of her character by sort of side characters isn't great, and there is a kind of baddie that does some stuff that I thought was really uncomfortable with her. So just as a heads up, if you are someone who is sensitive to that kind of treatment of a trans character, just to keep an eye out for. But I really, really enjoyed this. I thought it was fabulous. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I finished my epic reread of The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Stormlight Archive. I owe you guys a video on my thoughts on rereading this book because rereads are so very rare for me, but I want to reread this, reread Words of Radiance, read Oathbringer for the first time, and then get myself set up for Rhythm of War, which comes out in November. So this is another epic one that's really difficult to describe, but basically this takes place in a world that is constantly battered by these incredibly powerful high storms, incredibly destructive, horrible, horrible things. And we have a whole giant cast of main characters that have their destinies intertwined, whether they know each other or not. It's great, it's brilliant. I was a little bit less blown away by this book the third time that I read it, now being much more of a kind of veteran of the fantasy genre. This was my very first Brandon Sanderson book that I read back in 2010 or 2011, and I was totally blown away by it. But I still really, really enjoyed it reading it now. I will talk about it more in that video, but I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up was an audiobook read for me. This is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. I really, really enjoyed this one. There were some places where I wish she could have expanded a little bit more, but honestly that's more on me than on her. And it does give a really brilliant kind of launching off point for learning more about the topics that she discusses in this book. So this is a very famous one. You've probably seen it, but you may not know what it is about. Basically, it is a British perspective on race, and she goes into race and various kind of categories. So race and feminism, race and class. She talks about history. She does a really amazing overview of kind of major events in British history that you may or may not know about, going from, you know, way back into Britain's role in slavery and colonialism, all the way through to like the 1980s and 1990s. Murder cases, riots, sort of huge laws that were enacted. Really, really interesting stuff. I think my favorite section in this was the history and also her section on feminism, because she talks about a lot of her personal experiences being on British radio, for example, and getting set up as kind of the bad guy attacking all these nice white women, basically. It was really good. It was a really, really interesting book. Again, it is so tiny. I think this is like a 5.5, 6-hour audiobook. I would have loved to have had a little bit more to each chapter, but honestly, again, it gives you a really good survey of a lot of these topics, and it gives you a really good place to start off with learning a little bit more. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend the audiobook, by the way, because she reads it herself. And while that isn't something that I always enjoy, I think for this in particular, it was a really, really smart choice because so much of this is her own experience. So I really liked this. I would definitely recommend that. Next up, I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is a lovely, wholesome and heartwarming book. I felt like this was the perfect thing to read when I was starting to feel a little bit under the weather and, you know, everything was kind of meh, and I was reading a lot of darker, less happy stuff. So I wanted to pick up something that was just wholesome and nice, and that's exactly what this was. So this is the pick for, I think, September for the book club that I am in, the Space Sirens book club, which I'll link all of their information down below. We're going to be doing a live show about this book, so I'm not going to say too much about it, but basically we follow a character named, I can't remember, Linus Baker, and he is a caseworker, kind of like a social worker for the department in charge of magical youth. I can never remember any of these like long names. So he lives kind of this very mundane life, very kind of gray, boring life in his house with his cat, and he listens to his records and he doesn't really do much else. He's basically invisible. So he gets called into extremely upper management and they are going to send him out onto this very, very highly classified case. So basically he's going to get sent way out to this orphanage that's sort of in isolation almost, and it's a place where many dangerous children are living, and he's basically going to investigate the conditions and also the man who runs the orphanage and see if it should be shut down or not. This is a wonderful book. It is so lovely. It's all about this one character. There's lots of other stuff going on. So he like meets the children, and you know, he meets this man Arthur who is running the orphanage, and you know, some lovely sparks fly and everything like that. But for me, what I loved about this so much was seeing someone grow and come out of their shell so much in such a wonderful way. He has his own prejudices, he has his own kind of rigid ideas. Being in this job for like 17 years or however long it is, he is a very much a by the book kind of guy, and he begins to sort of see things from a new perspective, and he begins to kind of question what he's always been told, and I thought that was just so lovely. This is a very sweet book. It was a little bit too sickly sweet for me in some places. You know me, I like my stuff to be a little bit kind of grittier, I guess, but it was a lovely read. I would highly recommend this. This is a perfect like winter book when it's super gray outside, it's raining maybe, and you just want good comfort reading. This is perfect. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read what I think may be my favorite book of the year so far. It was so good. So good, and I knew I would love this, which is why I've been putting it off for a while, but I'm really glad that I picked this up. I will be doing a full review for this book eventually, but this is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. So this is a adult fantasy. It is a debut novel, and it is the first of I think it's going to be a trilogy, and I don't want to say too much about this because I am going to be doing a full review, but I also think it's one of those books that's so wonderfully brilliant to go in knowing as little as possible, because the way that everything sort of snaps together is so good. So the way that this book is marketed, it really sounds like it is a, you know, one perspective book, and that's not true at all, and I think that it kind of does it a little bit of a disservice. So basically we have Lynn, who is the daughter of the emperor. She had a childhood illness that has robbed her of a lot of her memories, so the emperor won't name her heir until she gets those memories back. So she decides she's going to sort of go about this her own way. She steals his kind of keys to different doors in the palace, and she's going to teach herself this amazing bone shard magic in order to prove herself worthy. Then we have a smuggler. who sort of witnesses the sinking of this island, and it's this huge turning point in his kind of life. He's my favorite character. He's absolutely amazing. And then we have an established couple who are two women, one of whom is the daughter of the governor, comes from this life of privilege, and the other is basically a girl who grew up on the streets, and kind of the points of contention between the two of them. This was so good. It was so amazing. I loved the world. It's all set on these islands that are kind of ruled by one emperor. The magic is incredible. It's just absolutely fantastic. It's basically like kind of like magical coding. The characters were fantastic. I absolutely loved them, and it's just such a good book. You should absolutely pick this up when it comes out in September. If you can't wait for a review, my friend Judith did a review for this book, and I'll go ahead and link it on the screen, and she does a really great job with that, and describes a lot of the things that I really enjoyed about it too. So you can go ahead and check out her review. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Next up is another audiobook read. This is The Black God's Drums by P. Djèlí Clark. I have read a ton of his, well, a ton, like 3 of his other novellas, which I absolutely loved. I loved this one a little bit less, but it was still really, really good. So basically this is set in New Orleans, in historic New Orleans, and we follow a girl who kind of lives on the streets and makes her living by pickpocketing. And she has this connection to the storm goddess, and she kind of shows her visions and things. And she uncovers this plot to sort of sell away this incredible magical weapon, and she ends up kind of getting in with this crew and trying to stop this from happening. I thought this was really good. I really liked it, but I didn't kind of connect with it on the same level as something like The Haunting of Tramcar 015 or Ring Shout, which is his new book that's coming out. I feel like maybe, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like maybe this was an earlier one of his, so you're seeing a lot of his talents kind of develop. I really love the world. I thought that he did a really great job of pulling in different kind of historical elements and different sort of social elements. I thought it was really good, but kind of compared to his other stuff that I've read that I've enjoyed so much more, it wasn't quite to that 5-star level. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, which is a really great rating, but it is the lowest for one of his books that I have read. And if you have seen my September TBR video, which is basically, as I said, just a huge panic about all of the arcs that I have to read, this first one is the very first that I've checked off of that schedule. So this is Dangerous Remedy by Kat Dunn. This came out in August. I believe the ebook came out earlier this year. This was a casualty of the pandemic. The ebook came out in May, I believe, when this was meant to release, and this book was pushed back into August for the hardcover. So I was really excited for this because a lot of people that I really love really enjoyed this one. So Tasha Suri, who's one of my favorite authors, really loved this. She was an early proponent of this book, and I thought it was just okay. And I think that one of the reasons for that is because I am not a predominantly YA reader, I think that I was hoping for a little bit more oomph from this. I feel like the characters and the story and everything were like here, when I was hoping they could have been here. And if they were here, this would have been an absolutely phenomenal book, but it didn't quite push to where I wanted it to be. So this book is set just after the French Revolution during the Terror, and we follow the Battalion of the Dead, which is led by a girl named Camille, and basically it's a crew that breaks people out of prison and saves them from the guillotine, which is really awesome. So this book opens fantastically. It opens with a jailbreak, and it's so good. But from there, it kind of like went down for me. I think that some of the magical elements, sort of the more supernaturally type elements, didn't quite work for me. They didn't feel like they really fit in with the story, and I feel like the characters weren't quite there for me. I liked the boys most of all, which was very surprising, but this book really focuses on the girl. So it focuses on Camille, whose parents were casualties of the revolution. They were guillotined, and this takes place a few months after that, and she's really struggling with that. and kind of serving the memory of her parents and doing what she thinks they would have wanted her to do. We have Ada, who I should have loved, but for some reason I didn't quite click with her, who's kind of the science-y type, and she handles the battalion's sort of finances, and she and Camille are in an established relationship, which I actually really liked. I love an established relationship. And then we have Al, who is kind of their fallen aristocrat who has all the connections. I really liked him and I wanted more from him because he was the most interesting character to me. And then we have Gil, who is a deserter from the army, and he was kind of a non-entity in this book. And then we have other characters who come in as well, but that's kind of the battalion. So I thought it was just okay. I think that if you are someone who reads predominantly YA, maybe you would like this a little bit more than me, because it felt a little bit generic for the amazing sort of setting and story that it had, but I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was fun, it was a good summer read, but it wasn't brilliant. So those are the books that I read in the month of August. It was a pretty good month. I think I had my 2 really stellar books, The Bone Shard Daughter and The Doors of Eden, and the rest of the books that I read were good. But I feel like I've had a lot of like really just incredible months for reading, so this one felt a little bit underwhelming. Again, you've seen my September TBR video, you know that I have a lot of really good stuff coming up. If I can manage to cram as many of those books into the month of September as possible, that would be awesome, but we'll see how it goes. I would love in the comments below if you would let me know if you've read any of these books, if they're in your TBR, or what you happen to have read in the month of August that you really loved. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.